Good morning, everybody on the call today. The clock is 10 o'clock. The time is 10 o'clock, that is. We've got a pretty full program for this morning. So I think while all the participants are joining us, it is good for us to start to ensure that we do keep to time and we also ensure the quality of our session today. I want to warmly welcome you once again. My name is Duminkomo. I am the Women in Mining Program Specialist at the Minerals Council. And we are flying this plane jointly with my co-pilots, Mukhaliadi Siabela, who is the president of WiMSA. The session is co-hosted by WiMSA, Women in Mining South Africa, as well as Minerals Council, Women in Mining. So on behalf of the two organizations, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session as we come together to recognize, celebrate, and reflect on the vital contribution of women in the mining industry. International Day of Women in Mining is celebrated annually on 15 June. And this celebration was initiated by IWIM, International Women in Mining, which is a global nonprofit organization that advances equity within the natural resource sector. And this year, we mark this occasion under the theme of the 2026 theme of a year of collective action and impact, which is a powerful reminder that meaningful progress in our industry requires shared commitment, collaboration, and the courage to drive lasting change. Colleagues, can I ask that when you join, please can you ensure that your mics are muted to ensure the quality of our session today? This day provides us with an important opportunity to not only honor the achievements of women across the mining value chain, but also to acknowledge the work that still lies ahead in building a more inclusive, equitable, and supportive industry for all. We all know that mining has long been seen as a traditionally male-dominated sector. However, even when you look back into the genesis of the mining industry, especially South Africa, we know that women have been significant contributors and participators in the sector. And in today's world, women continue to break barriers and lead with excellence and shape the future of our industry in meaningful ways. And so in today's conversation, we have an opportunity to amplify the voices of women, the voices of our allies and champions of diverse and inclusive mining. We have an opportunity to share experiences and inspire continued progress. We are proud to partner with our stakeholders, our partners in mining, in creating spaces such as this webinar where dialogue, learning, and collaboration can thrive. And whether you are joining us today as an industry leader, a practitioner, student, advocate, or supporter, your presence is indeed valuable and appreciated. And we encourage you to please also indicate on the chat box your name and where you are joining us from. We thank you for making time to be part of this important discussion. And we trust that today's session will be insightful, inspiring, and empowering. Welcome once again. We look forward to the conversation ahead, and we also want to say a special thank you to our speakers today, our panelists, our keynote speaker, as well as our panel moderator, who will be introduced in due course. Before I hand over to Mokgaliadi Siabela, I just want to once again point out a few house rules to ensure the quality of our session. Please, colleagues, can you make sure that your mics are muted at all times? Please ensure you keep your cameras off unless you are the speaker. And you may also post questions on the chat box, which we will monitor throughout the sessions. And those that cannot be addressed during the session will be addressed afterwards. And finally, please do enjoy, be inspired, be empowered, be reinvigorated once again to hashtag break the ground, hashtag own the shift, because we all know that mining matters to all of us and to society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dumi. And a good morning to everybody. It's a great pleasure to join you this morning. As introduced, my name is Mokgaliadi Siabela, and I'm President of Women in Mining South Africa. And we are really excited to have you today. And we will jump straight into our agenda. In celebration of Women's Month, we also thought it would be great to listen and hear from our young women in mining, hear what their stories are, how their experiences are as a young woman in mining. And I also encourage you to share your own story of, when you joined the industry, wherever that may have been as a young person. What were your first impressions? What are the things that you were wrong about? What are the things that you wish you had known? And what are the things that you now want young people to know? Please join us in sharing that in the chat. And please help me welcome our first speaker, Ms. Nomvula Mahlangu, who is a mining engineering graduate and also a mining intern in the gold sector. And she's going to be sharing her journey to date and speaking on behalf, I believe, of many young women in mining about what the first to 5 years of mining looks like. What are the things that you kind of got wrong in your perceptions, and how is the experience looking, and how excited are you about the future? So please, with your virtual claps and round of applause, let's welcome Ms. Nomvula Mahlangu. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I hope I am audible. I have tonsils, so my voice is a bit low today. I'm sorry about that. But I have prepared a little something for young people, employers, and industry to think about as we celebrate this day. So again, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important conversation as we commemorate International Day of Women in Mining. It is an honor to share this platform with women, professionals, leaders, students, graduates, and industry stakeholders who believe that mining is not only about what we extract from the earth, but also about the people we develop, the environments we create, and the legacy we build. International Day of Women in Mining is a moment of celebration. It is a moment to recognize the women who have entered spaces where they were not once expected to belong. It is a moment to honor the women who work underground, on surface, in boardrooms, in laboratories, in communities, in operations, in technical services, in academia, in policy, in entrepreneurship, and across the entire mining value chain. But it is also a moment of reflection, because celebration without reflection can easily become performance. And in the spirit of Youth Month, I believe we have a responsibility to ask honest questions, not only about how far we have come, but how real that progress feels to the people who are still entering the industry today. There is no doubt that the mining industry has made progress. Today, we see more women studying mining-related qualifications. We see more women entering operations. We see more women in leadership development programs. We see more conversations about diversity, inclusion, transformation, safety, mental health, and belonging. We see companies publishing commitments, launching initiatives, and speaking more openly about the importance of women in mining. Many of them had to be the first. The first woman in the team, the first woman underground, the first woman in a certain role, the first woman to speak up in a room where nobody expected her to have a voice. Because of them, many of us are no longer asking whether we belong in mining. We know that we do. The question now is, what kind of mining industry are women being asked to belong to? That is where the real work begins. Inclusion cannot only exist in company reports, policies, posters, and social media campaigns. It must exist in the change house. It must exist underground. It must exist in how young people are trained, treated, supported, and included. It must exist in how professionals are corrected, mentored, and protected. It must exist in how women are spoken to when there are no cameras, no audits, and no formal events taking place. It must exist in the everyday culture of the workplace. Sometimes, as an industry, we want to move quickly with diversity and inclusion on paper, but the lived experiences of the people on the ground do not always move at the same pace. On paper, we can say that we are inclusive, but in reality, do people feel safe enough to speak? Do young professionals feel guided or merely thrown into the deep end? Do women feel protected or simply tolerated? Do employees feel like they belong, or do they feel like they must constantly prove that they deserve to be there? These are the questions that determine whether inclusion is real or performative. My message today is divided into 3 parts: a message to employers, a message to employees and young professionals, and a message to industry. To employers, my message is this: representation is not the finish line. Hiring women is important. Opening doors is important. Creating graduate programs is important. But once people are inside the organization, the deeper responsibility begins. Employers must create environments where people can grow without being broken first. A young professional entering the industry is not only learning technical skills, they are learning culture. They are learning power dynamics. They are learning how decisions are made. They are learning who is allowed to make mistakes and who is not. They are learning what kind of behavior is rewarded and what kind of behavior is ignored. This is where leadership matters the most. It is not enough for companies to say that they support women and young people. They must prove it through fair and inclusive processes, consistent standards, mentorship, accountability, and psychologically safe working environments. If a company says it values inclusion, then its systems must reflect that. If a company says it values safety, then safety must include physical safety, emotional safety, and professional safety. If a company says it values transformation, then transformation must not only be about numbers, it must also be about culture. Real inclusion means that women are not only invited into the room, but are respected in the room. Real inclusion means that young professionals are not only recruited, but developed. Real inclusion means that when people raise concerns, they are heard before they are labeled difficult. Real inclusion means that the workplace does not become a place where people lose themselves in order to survive.
Nomvula, I think you mistakenly muted yourself there. Can you just unmute yourself? Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No
Okay.
problem.
I am not sure. How long have I been muted?
Just 2 seconds, not far back. Yeah.
Real inclusion means that the workplace does not become a place where people lose themselves in order to survive. To employees and young professionals, especially those in their first 1 to 5 years, my message is this: your technical development matters, but your personal development matters just as much. As a recent graduate, my experience has taught me that the first year of working is not just about learning the job. It is about learning yourself. You enter the workplace with your degree, your dreams, your ambition, and your expectations. You think the biggest challenge will be technical. You think it will be the engineering, the production targets, the mining methods, the systems, the underground environment, or the operational pressure. And yes, those things are challenging. But one of my biggest discoveries has been that the workplace dynamics are real. Politics is real. Human behavior is real. Power dynamics is real. The way society operates outside the workplace often shows up inside the workplace as well. If you have not been exposed to that before, it can be difficult to navigate. You begin to realize that being good at your job is important, but it is not the only thing that shapes your journey. How you learn and communicate matters. How you manage pressure matters. How you respond to conflict matters. How you carry yourself matters. How you recover from disappointment matters. That is why I believe young professionals must work on becoming whole people. We cannot only develop the professional part of ourselves and neglect emotional, mental, spiritual, and personal parts of who we are. When people are incomplete, wounded, or unsupported, they often show up in ways that harm others, even when they do not intend to. They compete where they should collaborate. They gatekeep where they should hide, where they should guide. Sorry. They project their pain where they should often offer leadership. And that is not the direction our industry needs to move in. As young professionals, we must become technically competent, but we must also become emotionally mature, self-aware, and grounded. We must learn to ask for help. We must learn to take correction without losing confidence. We must learn to advocate for ourselves without becoming bitter. We must learn to be ambitious without becoming harmful. We must learn to enter the industry with excellence, but also with humanity. Because the future of mining will not only be built by the most qualified people, it will be built by people who are capable of leading themselves and others as well with empathy. To the broader industry, my message is this: the next phase of transformation must be measured by belonging. For many years, the industry has focused on access. Access matters. We needed women to enter mining. We needed young people to see mining as a possible career. We needed doors to open. But now we must move from access to sustainability. It is not enough to bring women into mining if the environment does not allow them to stay, grow, and lead. It is not enough to celebrate young professionals during Youth Month if we do not listen to what their first years in industry are teaching them. It is not enough to speak about diversity if the workplace still rewards silence over honesty. The industry must ask, what are we doing to make mining not only more diverse, but more humane? This means investing in mentorship that is practical and intentional. It means training leaders to manage people, not only production. It means creating reporting systems that people can trust. It means holding people accountable for workplace culture, not only operational performance. It means understanding that safety and inclusion are connected. A person who does not feel safe to speak may not report a hazard. A person who does not feel respected may disengage. A person who feels isolated may leave the industry altogether. So when we speak about women in mining, we are not only speaking about gender, we are speaking about the future of the industry. We are speaking about talent retention. We are speaking about innovation. We are speaking about ethical leadership. We are speaking about sustainability. We are speaking about whether the next generation will inherit an industry that is technically advanced but emotionally outdated, or an industry that has the courage to evolve fully. My hope for the mining industry is that we become brave enough to close the gap between what we say and what people experience. If we say women belong, let us build workplaces where they actually feel the belonging. If we say young people are the future, let us mentor them with patience and integrity. If we say that diversity matters, let us make sure that diverse people are not punished for bringing different perspectives. If we say we care about safety, let us make sure that safety includes dignity. International Day of Women in Mining is not only a day to celebrate women who have made it, it is also a day to think about the women who are still trying to enter, the women who are trying to stay, the women who are ill, the women who are trying to lead, the women who are trying to become everything they know they are capable of becoming while navigating environments that are still learning how to receive them. And in the spirit of Youth Month, it is also a reminder that young people entering mining today are not asking for an easy journey. We understand that mining is demanding. We understand that operations require discipline. We understand that excellence must be earned. But we are asking for fairness. We are asking for ethical leadership. We are asking for mentorship. We are asking for workplaces where we can grow without losing ourselves. We are asking for an industry where inclusion is not just a message, but a lived reality. As I close, I want to say this. The future of mining will not only be measured by how deep we can go underground, how much we can produce, or how advanced our technology becomes. It will also be measured by how well we treat the people who make mining possible. It will be measured by whether women can belong without shrinking. It will be measured by whether young professionals can grow without being silenced. It will be measured by whether companies are brave enough to make their values visible in everyday behavior. Progress has been made, but the next step is not just more representation. The next step is real belonging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nomvula, and everybody for the round of applause and the love we're showing for Nomvula. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call, we talk about when we talk about young women in mining, driving inclusion, driving innovation, and new ways of thinking. Thank you so much. We are running slightly behind time, and I'm going to go straight into our keynote speaker. He needs no introduction, ladies and gentlemen. Please help me welcome Mr. Craig Miller, who is the Chief Executive Officer for Valterra Platinum, a board member and the chairperson of the Women in Mining Leadership Forum at the Minerals Council. So please, thank you so much, and we're excited to hear from you. Craig, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and good morning, everybody. And Once again, happy International Day of Women in Mining. Can I just check that you can hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So thanks for affording me the opportunity just to give a few remarks. And then I do think that we've got some questions and I'll hopefully be able to give you some solid answers to that. But if I can, just let me first of all just make some opening remarks as we mark today's important day in terms of the participation and inclusion and importantly the leadership responsibility of in creating a more inclusive and diverse mining sector in South Africa. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, fellow colleagues from Valterra Platinum, our partners, and everybody who's on the call today. Let me start by acknowledging the obvious irony. I'm a man sitting here before you to speak about diversity, inclusion, and the empowerment of women in mining. That really matters because I fundamentally believe it's not about who speaks, but it's about leaders who choose to own. Inclusion, diversity, gender equality are not women issues by any stretch of the imagination. They are leadership issues, business imperatives, and safety issues, and they're fundamental to the future sustainability of our industry, both in South Africa and I would argue globally. So today, I speak not only as the CEO of Valterra Platinum, but the chairperson of the Women in Mining Leadership Forum and part of a mining sector that is being reshaped by leadership, contribution, and the determination of women across every level of our organizations. This moment belongs to the women already redefining what leadership in mining looks like. At the highest levels, leaders like Natasha Viljoen, who's now Chief Executive of Newmont Mining, Nolita Fokuda at Anglo-American, Mana Kluta at Ivanhoe, and Mpumi Zikalala at Kumba Iron Ore are among many others here at home and around the world that are certainly shaping what leadership looks like. This is no longer exceptional leadership, but I certainly believe that it is defining leadership. So let me frame what I have to say around the fact that inclusion does matter. If it makes a real impact, if it makes people feel safer, feel that they really belong and have a seat at the table, changes their daily experience, opens real opportunities, and reshapes the systems that have held too many back for too long, then I would argue inclusion absolutely matters. So to understand why, we should be honest about our recent history and the transformation journey as well. As many of you know, until 1996, women in South Africa were prohibited by law from studying and working in our industry. That's only 30 years ago. In the life of a sector, it almost is no time at all. Yes, progress has been made, but progress alone is not transformation. Women represent just over half of South Africa's population, yet remain underrepresented in the workforce, and even more so in mining, where participation sits at roughly 1/5 or 20%. That gap tells us something incredibly important. While the system has somewhat evolved, it has not evolved nearly enough. And behind every statistic, there are real experiences of environments, cultures, and systems that are not originally designed with women in mind. Women in mining still face unsafe environments, including discrimination, harassment, bullying, gender-based violence, equipment and infrastructure that was never designed for them in mind. They also face limited paths to progress and cultures where speaking up carries a cost. And certainly no company is immune from this reality, including Valterra Platinum. That's why honesty matters. Because we cannot change what we're not prepared to acknowledge. If inclusion exists only in policy, but not in our daily experience, then you would argue that it doesn't exist at all. And that's why this year's theme of International Women's Day in Mining, Voices of Impact, a year of collective action and impact, is so important. No single company can solve this. No single policy can fix it, but progress relies alignment and collaboration across mining companies, organized labor, the regulator, industry bodies, and organizations like Women in Mining South Africa and the Women in Mining Leadership Forum, working together to accelerate change. And Valterra Platinum is committed to playing its part. Real change happens when the effort becomes collective and is sustained. As leaders, and particularly men in leadership, allyship must move beyond just passive support. It has to translate into action, challenging unacceptable behavior when we see it, challenging and creating opportunities, advancing talent, and creating environments where everyone can truly contribute to themselves and being able to contribute. So at its core, we know that mining is about people, and a sector that doesn't fully harness that talent, that judgment and perspective of women is choosing to operate well below its potential. So inclusion is not separate from performance. I'd argue that it's absolutely central to it. So nowhere is this clearer than in safety. Historically, we know that we have defined safety as the absence of physical harm. That absolutely remains critical, but it is also incomplete. Safety is the ability to work free from harassment, intimidation, and fear. It is dignity and respect, and it is where the people believe they can raise their concern and be taken seriously. When people feel safe, are seen, are heard, and valued, they speak up. And in mining, we all know that speaking up saves lives. It stops an unsafe act. It questions a poor decision, calls out harassment before it becomes normal, and protects the person standing next to you. A workplace where people are afraid to speak up is not a safe workplace. So at a time when diversity and inclusion commitments are being questioned globally, we must be equally clear. The evidence has not changed. Companies with gender diverse leadership are around 25% more likely to outperform their least diverse peers financially. Diverse teams make better decisions. And in mining specifically, more inclusive teams have been shown to deliver materially better safety outcomes. BHP has reported that its most inclusive and diverse teams record a 67% fewer recordable injuries than its least diverse ones. If inclusive teams are safer teams, then inclusion is not optional in mining. It sits at the heart of how we protect lives and manage risk. The shift, therefore, that we have to make is from stated intent to measurable action. Because as we all know, commitments do not create change, it's the actions that do. The real measure is simple: whether a woman feels safe enough to report harm, whether that report is acted on quickly and fairly, whether leaders are held to account, and whether women can see real opportunities in our operations, in leadership, in technical roles, as well as in ownership. At Valterra Platinum, we are making deliberate progress. Our board commitments include at least 20% representation of Black women and a minimum of 25% of women overall. On female representation, we've gone well and beyond those commitments, with women now making up almost 40% of our board, as well as our executive team, while women in senior roles is around 30%. But I absolutely recognize that we still have a huge amount of work to do, and particularly advancing women in some of the technical roles. So behind those numbers, we are building a pipeline. We're training, mentoring, and developing women to step into leadership, and we will be refreshing our diversity policy in the foreseeable future. But empowering women cannot stop just at direct employment. It has to reach across our entire value chain, to suppliers, to contractors, to entrepreneurs, and to host communities. And in May this year, 63 small and medium enterprises graduated from our contractor mentoring support program. Of those businesses, nearly 50% were women-owned or women-led, and 66% had significant Black women ownership. But let me be clear, these aren't achievements to celebrate as endpoints. They are indicators of direction that inclusion must be intentional, it has to be practical, it must be measurable, and it must be tied to real economic participation. It's about opening paths for women in mining to lead, to own, to build, and to share in the value that this industry creates. These are steps that matter. They are not grounds for comfort. They point to direction, but not a destination. We do continue, regrettably, to see resistance to change, where policies are applied inconsistently, and women are still asked to prove that they belong. That is where leadership must be most visible, because transformation is not achieved through that policy alone. It requires a sustained cultural change. And that means being willing to ask difficult questions. Who is still excluded? Whose voices are still not being heard? And where in our own organizations are we tolerating and protecting behavior that has no place in our companies or in our industry? So change is not the responsibility of just a few, it's the responsibility of all of us. So as I close, let me come back to this year's theme. The truth is that all of it counts. Organizations that are intentional about changing the status quo and the policies, the persons who find the courage to speak up, the leader who listens, and the ally who uses their position to challenge exclusion. We have to change how.
I'm sorry, somebody mistakenly muted you. Sorry, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Sorry, let me just do that again. So hopefully, I just want to re-emphasize this last point. So as I close, let me come back to this year's theme. The truth is that all of it counts. Organizations that are intentional about changing the status quo and the policies, the person who finds the courage to speak up, the leader who listens, the ally who uses their position to challenge exclusion. We have to change how we lead, how we make decisions, how we invest, and importantly, how we hold ourselves to account. For Valterra Platinum, this is not a side issue. It goes to the heart of the organization that we're building and the part that we want to play in this industry's future. One that is safer, more inclusive, more competitive, and more sustainable. Change is certainly possible, we all know that. But it's only possible if we're intentional about it and make it practical and measurable, and if everyone takes the responsibility for delivering it. So thanks very much. Thanks for listening to me. Be delighted to take some questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Craig. Your address was really moving, and please welcome, help me really show appreciation to Craig for his time and the messaging that is really truly inspiring. So we asked our delegates to share questions, and we received hundreds. It would need days to go through them. So I'm going to just touch on some of those that came up frequently. And you've already touched on most of these in your address. And the first one was really around the barriers that you also outlined that are preventing women from advancing into senior leadership, operational roles, as well as technical, and becoming leaders and CEOs of our organizations. And the question here is, what must change to remove these barriers? So you spoke about infrastructure, spoke about systems and all of that. What do we need to do to change these barriers or to remove these barriers?
Yes, I think first of all, thanks very much for the question, and also the very kind hands up and hearts and all the rest of it. I appreciate it, but more importantly, I think it's a reflection just on the people who are participating today, that a lot of people here have really changed and helping to change the industry that we operate in. And I think what helps remove some of the barriers is being able to speak up, to showcase where there are areas of exclusion, where there is discrimination taking place, and really to highlight that so that these can be addressed. I think most organizations want to create a more inclusive and diverse company, and sometimes we just don't know how to do it. And so having people speak up, being able to contribute, I think is incredibly important. I also feel that it is, as I said in my address, it does take leadership. It takes people to make a deliberate choice to really promote an organization where we celebrate the inclusion, where we honor the contribution that can be made from a diverse and inclusive group of people. Women, people of different genders, different sexual affiliations, etc. The list is endless. But it is important around, therefore, leading it and being very, very deliberate in creating those opportunities. At the same time, I think we as an industry, in recognizing that we've still got a long way to go, where we've done a significant, well, there's a greater women participation in some of what you would term historically some of the softer roles, being either finance, people in organization, corporate affairs, etc. We recognize that, but we need to fundamentally work on creating more opportunities for some of those technical roles. Some of that is breaking down their stereotypes. Some of that is addressing the infrastructure constraints that prevent women from participating more actively in those activities. And quite frankly, as well, is creating and recognizing some of more role models, because we all know that if we have somebody that we can emulate to, that we can look up to, that creates that confidence, that conviction that actually you can be successful. So I think it's multifaceted, and certainly I think it requires us all being very deliberate in our actions. But I think if anything has been demonstrated in the last 30 years is that that change can happen. But I think we also recognize that we've got to get on with it at pace. And so it is multifaceted, and I think it's the obligation on all of us to really help support for us to really help support the greater participation of women in the industry, not only, as I said, in the companies, but in our suppliers, in our contracting companies, and also in shareholding of mining companies.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It will require all of us to stand together and make sure that we move ahead with actionable items and intention. And the next question is really speaking to that, to say, you've quoted great numbers in terms of representation. So the attraction of women in the industry, I think we've made good progress. People or women know that, they can come in. But how do we then create workplaces that are now designed with them in mind, and that they will genuinely feel they belong, so that they can influence and be trusted at decision-making levels across the industry as well?
Yeah, so I think the real sort of opportunity there for us is first of all to create much more of a sort of a larger grouping, mass of women participation in the industry, because I think that will just help sort of propel the change that really is required. That will then sort of really sort of change the sort of the diversity. But more importantly, to my earlier point around changing the way decisions are taken, the way work is done, the way that we think through the sort of the full economic participation of women throughout their entire value chain. I think it is, to my earlier point, it is really around being deliberate in that space. I think it's really then being, as leadership, really listening and hearing to what people are saying, and really taking what we've heard and translating that into tangible action, to create a much more inclusive work environment. I don't think it's changed overnight. It's certainly supported by policy. It's certainly supported by being much more deliberate in measuring our performance in terms of the sort of the targets, the measurement points that we've created, being honest and recognizing where we've failed, but most importantly, really then sort of being extremely deliberate in creating those opportunities for greater women participation in our entire value chain. So it does come back to policies, but it also comes back then to how we measure our success against those policies and being incredibly deliberate in terms of making sure that they come into effect.
Yeah. And someone in the chat is also asking about, measurable actions and accountability mechanisms that the organization and industry, organizations and industry should then, think about implementing to drive true inclusion, improve safety and empowerment, becoming, a business imperative, as you've put it, and not just a compliance requirement and, just using policy as a driver.
Yeah, I think the real opportunity for us in terms of that is once again just being very clear, ambitious, and transparent when we set our targets for gender across all levels within our company. As I said, particularly in some of the technical and operational and leadership roles, and then to track that performance consistently, and to acknowledge where we've not met those targets, but importantly, then how we're going to go about achieving those targets. If we just think more broadly in terms of how we operate businesses, how we operate sort of various activities across the value chain, it is target based, it is performance based, it is there are consequences of not achieving particular outcomes. And I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be much more deliberate in how we go about it from an inclusion and a diversity perspective. So therefore, it can't just be something that's passive. It has to be really, really deliberate. And as I've quoted some of the examples and you've highlighted it, I don't think there's necessarily a case still to be answered or anything like that in terms of why we shouldn't have much greater inclusion and diversity in the workplace. The stats are there. It just requires us to absolutely get on with it. I think we do need to acknowledge where there are bottlenecks, and how we address those bottlenecks, how we create the opportunities through, at school, at university, etc., and then how we fundamentally address some of the inhibitors within the workplace, so that everybody can participate in our industry. It's an enormous employer. It's an enormous value creator for so many people, and we should therefore be able to easily create far greater economic participation than we currently see from a more diverse workforce.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I want to emphasize that it requires ownership of the vision and the intention to change and transform. And I want to ask the last question, and it's forward looking to say, if we were to meet again 5 years on the same call, talking about the same industry and looking at now progress made, what tangible outcomes should we be then looking out as evidence of success, be it in safety, in how people feel in the workplace, and how people feel their dignity is respected, leadership representation, and true inclusion where people feel they belong in the industry? So what are some of those things that we'll be looking back at and say, we've really done well in these areas?
Yeah, so look, I think if we're able to achieve zero harm, that being physical harm and psychological harm, then I think that would be certainly a massive milestone having been achieved. And therefore, for us to achieve it, it does require us to be deliberate, as I come back to creating a workplace where people have the ability to participate meaningfully, they're able to speak up and have their actions implemented, and that we can really address we can really address bullying, harassment, victimization because of your gender or sexual orientation or anything like that. So I do think that we've got a significant way to go. I think we need to recognize that we have to aspire to get to gender equality within the industry. Does that happen in 5 years? We probably need to be a bit realistic, just in terms of where we've got to fill some of the gaps. And I come back to those technical roles. So I think as an industry, we need to work through not only creating the environment for people to succeed in the mining industry, but also how we create the want to join the mining industry from tertiary education, from secondary education, etc. And I think those are areas that we can really sort of work on in the coming years to create that environment where you can actually see a pathway to creating gender equality within the industry. But for me, I really do think that our focus has to be in really addressing the sort of the opportunity of creating zero harm, and I come back to zero physical and psychological harm in terms of how we then create a much more inclusive working environment, successful environment for people to participate and extract the economic value that we see within the industry.
Fantastic. And thank you again so much, Mr. Craig Miller, for this conversation. It was really insightful, inspiring, and also I can feel the passion, and I'm really excited and look forward to us, standing together as an industry in truly creating an environment where we're not questioning whether anybody belongs, but people feel they belong and they are excited to contribute, value to the livelihoods of everybody involved and, the society in general. So again, thank you so much for everybody showing us, round of applause and love for the address and the engagement in the chat. Let's keep it going. And we're seeing people also, coming up with some of the solutions. Like I think you mentioned, it's not a one man or one woman show. We need all of us to come on board and address these issues. So again, thank you so much. Have a fantastic day further. I know you have a tight calendar, and we really appreciate you making time for us. Thank you so much. And thanks to the Valterra team as well.
Thanks, Mokhladi. Thanks very much for the opportunity to be with everybody today. Wish you continued success and a great conference. And really looking forward to getting the insights and for us to incorporate that into the Women in Mining Leadership Forum as part of the Minerals Council. And thanks to me for everything that you've done in putting today together. So thanks very much, and have a safe and great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to everybody for the love and your presence and your participation. It really is giving life to this event. And we're now going to move into our panel. And this panel is really going to say, where do we go from looking at just numbers? We want to move beyond the numbers conversation and look at strategies and actions around embedding true inclusion and belonging for a safer and innovative and sustainable industry. And this conversation will be led by our Dolis Kosana, who is a mining engineer and sustainability manager with great passion and influence in our industry. And I'm going to ask you to please help us welcome Doli and the panel to the stage. Thank you, Doli. Take it over.
Mokhaliadi, before Dolly takes over, can I please ask Koketso to put the program down so we can have a clear view of our panelists as well as Dolly? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Dumi. Thank you, Dolly.
Morning, Mokhaliadi. Morning, Dumi. I'm just going to allow the panelists to also join us. And if they can just be seen also by the camera, be seen Bali. There's Benford, there's Mahashana, and there's Tobile as well. But to kickstart the conversation, morning again, colleagues, and happy International Women in Mining Month. It's a privilege to be facilitating this panel discussion, and I'm looking forward to the engagements that I'm going to have with the panel members and really gaining insights from the esteemed professionals that are leading in different parts of the industry. As Mokhaliadi has said, my name is Dolis Kusana. I'm a sustainability manager at Exaro's flagship, that's Grootegeluk Complex, and I'm also a proud vice president for the South African Colliery Managers Association. So for today's panel discussion, we're going to be really looking at the industry collectively. The South African mining industry has collectively taken bold and collaborative steps, in terms of increasing presentation within the industry. This aligns with the mining charter, the targets, and also we've seen implementation of mandatory COPs where basically support the inclusion of women, including appropriate PPE facilities and related protocols. This is really to create a safe and conducive working environment for women in the industry. At the same time, we see modernization in terms of technology and innovation, where there's an opportunity to drive inclusion through safer work designs and the technology, and really have a flexible operating model that can unlock the full spectrum of available human capital. Now, in our panel, we'll be talking beyond the numbers, digging deep into strategies and actions for embedding inclusion and belonging for a safer, innovative, and sustainable mining industry. Allow me to introduce our esteemed panel members. First, I'll start with the gent in the panel, and thank you so much, Benford, for really joining us. So Benford is the Executive Vice President at Goldfields. We also have Bali Milanzi, who's a Director and Entrepreneur at Sebabasadi. So it's very important that when we look at mining, we also look at the entrepreneurship side. And we also have Mahashana Yaga, who's a global legal counsel at Sandvik and OEM's forum member. So I think this element will really bring the manufacturing and OEM contribution into the industry, because OEMs are present in all our operations, and they play a really critical role in ensuring that not only is the industry inclusive, but the work design as well through machinery accommodates women in the industry. And last but not least, we have Toby Lentlego, who's a superintendent rock engineer at Samanco Chrome, and basically we'll get a feel of the operational element to say, how do we move forward with what we've done already? Now we can get into it. And I think to kickstart the session, I'll start with Mr. Benford Mukwatle. Executive leadership has supported bold targets and visible interventions, but culture often changes more slowly than policy. And that's for obvious reason, because policy is mainly driven by compliance. But there's the culture element, which is basically not progressing as fast as the policy. Now, how can leadership use the modernization agenda not only to improve productivity and safety, but also to redesign work and build digital capability in the industry that we are all working in? Benford?
Morning, Dolly, and morning to all the participants and the panelists. I must say that first and foremost, it certainly is an honor to join this platform and to be accounted and to help shape the environment of business. I'm truly proud and of the ladies that are really making a difference and that have had the courage to join the mining industry. Your question is a very loaded question, and it's not a very simple, one, Dolly. But I'm going to try to, answer it from the Goldfields, perspectives, and I would imagine, from South Deep as an example. So when you look into our case of modernization as well as the digitalization, I must say that it has not been that easy, right? It's been an audacious journey, particularly seeing that we were the early adopters as one of the deep level mines in South Africa. But today, I can say that we firmly believe in the human capital, but not only in that the human capital as well as the technology can actually coexist, to make the jobs very much simple, to make the jobs effective, and to ensure that we create an enabling environment for our females and so forth. Now, in the main, we have been intentional as the Goldfields and as South Deep to have started to leverage the agenda of modernization and to transition our operations, particularly the South Deep, from the traditional labor-intensive gold mine into a unified socio-technical ecosystem. We've been designing this technology and the digital capabilities to enhance the performance, while at the same time removing the physical barriers that are experienced by the female employees. Now, I know that this webinar is not about the numbers, but I must say that this whole intent of modernization has enabled us to increase our female representation significantly. We have relocated the work to surface control rooms, and operate some of the underground equipment from the surface. This certainly has physically allowed us to accommodate the individuals who cannot meet the physical demand and the traditional undergrounds mining, such as the pregnant women, older workers, and so forth and so forth. In our training, we are utilizing the virtual reality, which is basically the simulators to train our employees. Obviously, this allows all the literacy levels and to build the technical familiarity, the capability together with the competence. So where there's undoubtedly the technology can bridge the gap and ensure that we can bring the diversity and the inclusion that is much needed within the organization. The journey, however, has not been simple, but we have been intentional about it.
Thank you so much, Brentford, for those insights. And I think in terms of the digital capability, you've mentioned autonomous operations, you've mentioned the use of virtual reality, which really does make operation for women much more simplified, and also the learning process, because it's also important that we incorporate a learning process that will effectively empower not only women, but also men in the industry. So the use of virtual reality and also the use of the autonomous machines makes a huge difference. And also because this ensures the inclusion that everyone beyond the gender works the journey and is empowered on the same level. Now, I think maybe in terms of looking at minds and also looking at the human element of the colleagues that we work with. So we have different life stages that we go through as human beings. As much as we're all professionals and we go into the workplace, we need to really consider the human element and what we go through as humans, which is a reality because it does affect a person at the workplace. Now, how do minds transform? How do minds transform to recognize that workers bring their whole selves to work, and thus creating an environment that accommodates this different life stages? For instance, there's the pregnancy that's there, there's the motherhood and parenting that's there, there's also the commuting that's there, because we find colleagues that are commuting from different provinces to work because of educational reasons, because of family that's out of the province. So how do we really transform this environment to be able to allow us to say we recognize the different stages, and for that reason we will actually transform our internal operating model to accommodate the human element?
Yeah, look, and there's a couple of things that companies can do. First and foremost, when we talk about the transformation, we firstly need to transform ourselves as human beings, and to shift away from the limiting beliefs. All right, and really acknowledge that diversity and technology brings in the different uniqueness and unique qualities within the the workplace. So it starts with us. Firstly, and companies, certainly needs to embrace the whole culture of, identity, the culture of diversity, and really build the leadership capabilities across the entire organization, and build this enabling environment for the workers to thrive. Technology must be embraced. Technology is not the the enemy. Yes, quite expensive, but if you're intentional about it, it can bring in a huge difference into the society and into the organization. It is certainly an enabler, for diversity and inclusion. So what is it that we need to do? We need to identify the digital, leadership, gaps and, tailor the specific developments for the environment. We need to partner with others that have been, through the, the journey and not to, pay the school fees. We need to believe, as I would have said, that the human capital as well as the technology can really coexist and, co-create the strategies to ensure that the workers, are active participants in designing the solutions as well as the interfaces. But I think that, most importantly, move past the compliance and build this whole network as well as the shaping the best practices and make the sector attractive for a wider talent pool.
Thanks, Bedford. I'm actually going to add on the technology element because that's a very important one in terms of, I think, post-COVID, we actually saw the ability of us being able to really work from home and still being able to deliver. So I think in terms of really accommodating the different stages of our working lives, there's the working from home element that was brought in, which basically brings a very flexible operating model. Now, we do find some mining operations that embrace it and some that are still lagging behind on that. And maybe that's where the lessons can be learned from those that are doing it and are still producing good results. So in terms of flexible hours as well, in terms of that operating model, being flexible enough to say there will be times when a person needs to attend to some other family-related matters, but in terms of not really being physical presence driven at the operation, but more results driven, outputs driven, to say I can still excuse myself for a school engagement, but still deliver my deliverables on time based on my own work and all my prioritization as well. So those are some of the things that we can introduce. But thank you so much for bringing in that technology element, because we have seen that it has made a huge difference in the industry and has simplified our way of work. It's very important that also we include the entrepreneurship element. So we see women in mining as entrepreneurs. So we're going to go beyond operations to really say, what does it really take to want to become an entrepreneur in the industry as a female? So I'm going to move over to Mbali Milanzi, who's an entrepreneur at Basadi. And Mbali, I think from your side, if you can share with the colleagues in terms of what barriers still prevent women entrepreneurs from emerging as women industrialists in mining, particularly in the technical and future-facing parts of the mining value chain.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dolly. It's lovely to be here with my esteemed panelists. I think I want to reframe the conversation from a barriers perspective and rather look at what has been really crucial in terms of Tepa Basadi growing from an organization that 10 years ago was just, ladies without any client, to today, working for a majority of the mining majors within South Africa, having a staff complement of professionals of 50 to 70 employees. And I think what has been really key for us has been a mix or enablers, three enablers, and that's been enterprise and supplier development. Because running a business versus being a professional and doing the work are two completely different things. So women need to be given the tools and the skills to be able to run a business. That's the first thing. Secondly, what has also been very pivotal is legislature, the policies that are in place, whether it be from a mining charter perspective, and preferential procurement has been key, because it says that I will choose a level 1 triple BEE contributor for my business because it makes sense for my scorecard. And that's how we drive inclusive economic empowerment. And I think what has been even more crucial and you know, really the icing on the cake in this instance has been being able to secure long-term contracts, because long-term contracts are what enable you to have a long-term perspective in terms of your business. They enable you to think, you know, beyond just the next project, but what can I do in terms of being able to improve my service delivery? It gives you the ability to negotiate with, you know, funders in terms of being able to have finances to pursue different opportunities. It gives you the bandwidth, the room and the space to be able to experiment and explore different opportunities. And that's where, you know, I think if we can get that mix right, women will be able to take on innovative projects because you're not worried about the next project that I need to get. You know, if you think of of construction entrepreneurs who, you know, it's about getting the next construction job, and you can't be in a space of thinking 5 years from now I can build something that is, you know, that can enable my business from a digital perspective, from an innovative perspective, because you're thinking about cash flow for now. So I think if we can really get that mix right, we can really propel the next set of entrepreneurs. What's also crucial and the role that the mining industry really plays is access to opportunities. You know, we're all here because mines create opportunity. But what is key is how do we make those opportunities transparent and open to women? Because a lot of procurement is still driven by closed tenders. And understandably so, because there's a lot of work that is involved in, you know, bid adjudication and so forth if you're going to open it up. But it presents a huge challenge for women to enter if they are not even considered to begin with. So it's a really, it's, you know, I like the word intentional because it's going to take intentionality, but it's also going to be a lot of hard work in order for us to really include women entrepreneurs in this space. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now, Dolly.
Thanks, Mbali, for that insightful mix in terms of really how can women get through and really be active participants in the mining value chain. I think on my side, maybe just a follow-up question on what you've mentioned on transparency. I believe you're referring to transparency from the mining houses side.
Yes, definitely. You know, there's various platforms that are being used to advertise bids and so forth. But there's a select few opportunities that are on those platforms, right? But there are other opportunities that are not made public. And those are what we call then closed bids. So I can choose as the procurement specialist who I'm going to bring into that closed bid, and can be five companies, but it can be 5 male-owned companies. So there needs to be, if we continue in that same trajectory, we need to ensure that those 5 companies, at least half, if not the majority, are then female-owned.
Correct. And I
And
think
that's where the homework, you know, comes in to actually then find those women.
Correct. And I think how we can actually incorporate the not only BE companies, but Black-owned female companies is really in terms of the adjudication process. What we can do is actually have that as a KPI. And I think for me that then will drive and force the procurement colleagues to ensure that there's inclusion of women and also that the rating of the company considered Black, not only Black, but female-owned organizations that can participate and contribute in the value chain. So I think from what you're saying, it's really a reflection to the mining houses in terms of how do we really adjudicate in terms of really including women. And maybe our adjudication process must be intentional to say we want female. And once we get that, it will really force the procurement team to broaden the pool and really have a mix of not only men, but also female who are actually considered for technical and future-facing projects within the value chain. And one last question for you before I leave. I'm also mindful of the time because the conversations are really insightful. But maybe the last one, how can mining houses better support women businesses that probably specialize in equipment, digital services, and information-led solutions? I know we spoke about the supply development program that's there, but maybe in addition to that, is there anything else that maybe from your side you can say, this, if women are better supported in this manner, it will really make a difference for women to thrive as entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think, to have a very uncomfortable conversation, and please bear with me, transformation and achieving transformation is not going to be a fair exercise. So intentionality means that from the onset, we know what contracts matter, what contracts, where we can take a level of risk, obviously within a specific threshold, but a level of risk while ensuring that there's inclusive economic empowerment. So you can ring fence specific contracts that okay, we can take a level of risk with this, and be intentional about giving those specific contracts to women-owned businesses. That can be a start. And then you go on a journey with them in terms of, enterprise and supplier development, and, there's that preferential procurement as well to support them, because then they get, paid on time, they get paid earlier, which means that they've got cash flow. And if you implement something like that with a company, something that maybe we all look at as very not specialized or not complex, like such as cleaning. Something such as cleaning is a good contract, but it can evolve. It can evolve into specialized and industrial cleaning. But you need to start. You need to start somewhere, and you need to support that entrepreneur to develop into that specialized equipment, digitization, innovation within the cleaning space. So, we can go on and on, because it's not just cleaning, there's technical, but that's just one example where I believe that we can really make a huge difference if we are just more intentional about ring fencing opportunities for women. It cannot be a fair exercise.
I support that approach, and I'll give you a reason why. Because when the women in mining journey started, there were organizations where basically what they did was to ring fence positions for women, to say for these specific professions, we want women. So in terms of shortlisting, we really include women. So maybe a similar approach can possibly work when we talk about entrepreneurship and inclusion of Black-owned female businesses in the value chain. Thank you so much, Mali. A really insightful conversation. And now I think maybe to look at the OEM perspective in terms of the manufacturing and also the technology that is used in the equipment that we utilize in the operations. How can equipment and companies do more drive inclusion and increase the participation of women across the value chain? And that's what I'm addressing to Mahashana.
Thanks for having me. It's really nice this is my first Women in Mining event, and a few years ago I was a mentor in a similar organization, the International Women in Mining. So it's good to be part of this discussion. I think similar to what Mr. Mokwatle spoke about, which is digitalization, and the future of mining is really a focus from an OEM perspective. Equipment design or accessibility by design is almost an area that OEMs need to look at. Traditionally, obviously, mining looked at brute force and physical strength, and that shift from going to that to more digitalization and automation. Simple examples of having operators sitting in a control room in a well air-conditioned space really changes the narrative on who gets to participate in the industry. It also creates a safer working environment. And not to say that women are not strong. Women generally are as strong as men, but we do have priorities, right? And I think digitalization is an opportunity for us to drive that change. But I don't think it's enough, though, to just talk about designing products that are digitally driven and bringing in automation, because what we're seeing in the industry is that mine houses tend to provide training to existing operators. So the idea or the question you have to ask as well is, how do you bridge the digital divide, bringing in people that are not necessarily already participating in the industry to get the same experience and be able to learn the tools from a digital perspective as your existing workforce. And I think the OEM space is such an incredible opportunity to enable that change and to enable inclusion and enable participation by women and historically disadvantaged individuals, including disabled individuals, because you have the opportunity to have people do real mining, but in a digitalized way. I'm not a miner, right? So I'm one of the few that is in the support function and has worked in different industries. And I think the challenge that the mining industry, or the reality that the mining industry has to accept, is that the world is currently in a talent war. And if the industry doesn't shape up and allow the spaces for young people and for women to participate, we're going to be left behind. So it's no longer a question of what can mining do for women, or the other way around, how do we open spaces for women to participate? It's the industry needs to shape up to bring in these individuals. We have the youngest population in the world on the continent, and we often talk about building talent and inclusion for only the employees that we have within our organizations. But there's always people standing outside the door or the gate of a mine house waiting for employment. Why don't we learn from other industries that have taken concerted effort to really train internally, create academies, and really drive inclusion in a way that we haven't seen? Banking is a perfect example of that, where a few decades ago, they decided that the financial sector would no longer be underrepresented, and they made a concerted effort to build talent internally, and now leadership looks completely different. So I think the narrative needs to change a little bit. The tools are there. This conversation's probably been had a million times about we're digitalizing mining, it's automated, we're opening spaces for entrepreneurs, for women. It's the same conversation. Let's change the culture, let's be inclusive, let's track it. But are we really making concerted effort to bring in those individuals and build the structures that no longer talk about how do we have career projections, but how do we build pathways for those people to participate?
What I'm taking from the conversation is really being intentional about developing the talent. So we can talk about inclusion, we can talk about really women progressing on all the different levels in the hierarchy, but really being intentional as mining houses, as OEMs, as entrepreneurs, to say, what is it that we're doing intentionally to ensure that we develop women so that they can all be fairly represented in all the different gradings that we have within our structures. So really managing a talent pool, and that will also help with really improving the team morale within the organization, as well as encourage women to even push themselves when they see that these opportunities are there and they're really opening up. So Mahashani, as a female that's in the OEM space and that's also doing well in that space, What will it take to see more women to enter that space? Now, I know we're talking more about the talent that's within, but let's now shift the conversation to a woman who's outside and really wants to enter into that space. What will it take to see more women in technical and engineering and leadership roles within OEMs? I mean, you've got the experience, so it would be great to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pathway is really critical, right? Earlier, someone spoke about we have more young women studying in technical fields than we've ever seen. I think the mining industry also needs to realize that it's their responsibility to bring those women in. So other industries have built academies specifically that become a transitional point between university and coming into the industry. And that's an easy pathway, right? We do have an unemployment issue in this country and in Southern Africa in general. So there is an opportunity for mine houses to say, we're not just going to wait for the universities to feed in the pipeline. We're also going to create integration spaces for these young people to come in and show that they can add value. So once they come in, they go through a digital academy. Sandvik has one of those where you learn the skills of how to mine in a digital way and how to run automated machines, so that once you come into the workforce, you also feel like you're adding value. And this is how you mainly retain people within the workspace in general. So I think that's a really good option in the mining industry. It is difficult, I know, and we cannot talk about flexibility too significantly within an industry where you have to be on the site and be operational on the site. So there is also a need from a, I guess, women in mining organization perspective to talk about the realities of the industry. You're not going to be sitting in a cushy office if you have to be on a production site. That's the reality of the job. But how do we get you to have the readiness to participate within that organization so you don't have the culture shock factor when you do start? So there are, I see significant opportunities. There's also learnings that we can take from other industries, like the aviation industry has done really well in the digitalization of like maintenance machines for aeroplanes. And you saw a shift within the workforce from just a male-dominated field to where you started seeing women. And you have to be at the airport, right? So you can't be elsewhere. So there are opportunities for us to learn from other industries as well.
Thank you, Mahashan. I appreciate the reference to other industries, because that's really saying we can learn from other industries beyond mining. And I really appreciate your honesty as well, because it's not as easy as it looks. You know, I think what it needs as well is a lot of grit to ensure that you thrive and progress in the industry. So thank you so much for that perspective. But now I want to take it more to operations. And I think the woman who can help us to really have that view is Tobile. So Tobile, from your side, let's look at operation point of view in terms of the modernization of the way of work, on how can we improve women's experiences on site through better ergonomics, smart design, remote or assisted operations where appropriate, and technology really to be more inclusive.
Thank you, Dolly, for that. So I think firstly, the core of inclusivity is to understand that we have physiological challenges to men, hence why the need for all these modernization initiatives. And unfortunately, while you have operations that are newer, for example, your massive mines that are mechanized by nature, and it is easier in those operations to have an operation-wide modernization effort. It is more difficult in your older, more conventional mines, because they were built for conventional mining, more labor intensive. And that's the core of where our modernization is still lacking behind. And in those operations, it means that activities and activities within the mining cycle need to be identified that can be modernized for the betterment or for the inclusivity of women. So you will not modernize the whole mine necessarily, but you need to identify certain roles that you can modernize or include technological advances that will assist women to be more included in it.
There's a bit of an echo. I'm not sure if it's from your side, Chabile. We can try again. We can try
I'm
again.
not sure where it was coming from.
Sorted. You can proceed.
Okay. So in those older mines, that is the approach that can be taken. For example, years ago, I was participating or part of the project team that looked at developing a lighter weight alternative power drill machine, which had less vibration. It was a Isidingo drill challenge where companies were invited to basically come up with a solution to a prototype to develop this, which was a success. And that went on to be trialed and used in the industry. But that is an example as well of where you can use one sort of technology to make it easier for women to sort of now become included in those roles and overall, therefore, include modernized work conditions for women as a whole.
No, thank you so much, Tobile. And I think what I'm also getting from this conversation is that some work has been done, which is a check for us. So we are progressing in the right direction. And I like what you said to say, can we really modernize the entire operation? Food for thought. I think maybe that's something that we can all think about for now to say, can we? Is it practical? How practical is it? And I think when you're asking ourselves that question is looking at not only large scale miners, but really the small scale miners, because the inclusion includes small players as well as the large players. So practical wise, can it be done? The conversation touched a lot on technology, touched a lot on inclusiveness and design in terms of machinery. But what's really important, which I'd like to close off this panel discussion by getting a response from each of the panelists in terms of the culture. I think we can close off the conversation looking at the culture to say many women are entering. We've seen mining is receptive. They're allowing the women to enter and to take up the space. And it's also entirely up to the woman as well to come to the party and deliver. But then there's also the element to say when women are entering the mining industry, for the first time, there's a huge culture shock. It's a different ball game, and especially when you're joining an industry that was historically male dominated. So maybe from each one of you, what should companies be doing differently, to really onboard females into the operation, integrate female workers into the different value chain, entrepreneurs as well, and OEMs, mentorship, leadership support to improve any retention of new entrants, because you do find women coming in and they're like, yo, this is not for me. And then they're out. Then we find them in consultation, we found them in banking because of really the culture shock and the way of work. So what can be done from the different perspectives? So I'll go back to Ben, then Bali, then Mahashani, then close off with Tobile. Ben?
Yeah, Dolly, I think that, organizations needs to make an effort to shift the the culture. It really is inexecutable. It can't be tolerated. To continue to embrace the so-called mining culture. In my opinion, executives needs to be the sponsors of the culture shift in the organizations. I think that the biggest problem that we have is that we are good at management of change, but not necessarily change management, because the change management, involves the human, aspects and, the beliefs and the behaviors and, so forth. So we have to be intentional with, that. In my opinion, it needs to start, from the recruitment. It needs to start with the assessments, and don't just, leave it there. Provide the support that is, that is needed, and, shift from this whole passive, sink or swim, right? And rather be, much more proactive and supportive of, the human. All right. We have to intentionally build this enabling environment. It can be done. All right. We have done it, and I'm sure that we can, equally build it and sustain it.
We definitely can, and I really support, but for the sake of time, I won't elaborate. So I'll take it over to Mbali.
Yeah, thanks, Dolly. It's a loaded question. I'll try my best to, take it from an entrepreneur. For us, what's key is that we can't be silent. When we see specific things, especially our industry is plagued by things such as fronting. Because of how the BBBE legislature is designed, you can have a level 1 BBBE contributor without ownership and representation of women. So I think it's very important that when we see certain things, just because we're ticking the boxes doesn't mean that there's, economic participation of Black women-owned businesses. Many women out there are partnering, and are silent partners. And people know this. They know Company X is not transformed, but they are quiet about it. So we need to challenge that. And I've seen that there are companies that are diving deep into, auditing your shareholding, auditing how you're structured as a business. And we need to do more of that. And that's how we're going to ensure that we really, truly have transformation in the industry, and that women entrepreneurs stay and they have sustainable businesses.
Oh, it's the silent partners for me, silent partners, the power behind the power. Conversation for another day. I'll move over to Mahashani.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. I think culture is difficult to talk about shifting culture if you don't measure it. The mining industry really talks about safety culture in a way that I haven't seen in other industries. And we need to talk about how we shift culture from an organizational perspective in the same way. So respect needs to be measurable and needs to be as a priority in the mining industry as safety is, because it's becoming a huge issue. And I think the only way often, particularly for people that are privileged, and in this case, obviously in the mining industry, if you're the privileged individual, usually a male, the only way for you to shift is to put targets to the shift in that culture. If we don't have a clear scorecard and what does it mean to shift the culture, because otherwise it's a very subjective discussion that doesn't then shift, it doesn't bring any change. So I think it's important to just make sure that it's very measurable and that we use data to check whether there has been that shift. So at Sandvik specifically, we have a psychological safety index where psychological safety is a constant discussion and a measure that we every quarter have to check whether the teams are feeling like they are psychologically safe. So I think those are some of the ideas or I guess actionable actions that we could put in place. The only thing I think in the mining industry that we struggle from a cultural perspective is we heavily talk about mentoring women. We mentor women a lot. We don't mentor men though, we sponsor men. And I think that shift needs to happen really quickly. Mentorship is vast and can happen informally as well. But if we want to sponsor women and have leaders that speak about them in rooms where they are not there to advance them and have those women become visible to shift the culture as well, because you need the women in the room to challenge the narrative, to say the culture actually isn't where you need it to be. We can no longer talk about 5 mine CEOs and senior executives in this day and age. In 2026, we're still counting 5 people that we know that are leaders in the industry. That's not enough. So it has to be one, measurable. Yes, we need to have women in leadership roles, but we need to also start sponsoring women so that they can advance to the top and influence the culture change.
Seconded. I think for me, the measurement and how do we do that? Performance contracts. Toby, I'll close off with you.
Thanks, Dolly. I think the core of the matter is the fact that culture is one of the most critical things that need to be amended in order for there to be success with women in mining initiatives. Many companies have taken so many efforts to put policies in place, But is there a gap between those policies that promote women in mining and what is experienced on the ground? For example, you have maternity programs in all the mines. What is experienced by women when they fall pregnant within those organizations at operational level? Do they feel included? Do they feel like they are well catered for in terms of those policies? So those gaps are what need to be bridged. The culture is very broad for us to actually try and dissect. So culture leads back to what you spoke about with graduates coming into the mine and the culture shock. For me, when I graduated, it was quite a culture shock going from our econ classes in university that do not prepare us for the culture shift when you get to the general workforce. So how do we bridge that culture and make young women feel comfortable enough to be retained? And I think initiatives need to center around that. As a young woman, I would have liked to have maybe a mentor, somebody to take me through their experiences that nobody would have told me about in formal setups like a classroom, in terms of how to deal with a lot of behavior that we know is not normal, but when you get to the mine, some of the older generation or the males, which they feel like is normal. I would have preferred to have a mentor. I would have preferred to have workshops for young women entering into the industry, just to prepare them and then guide them through, and in that way ensure that we retain our young female graduates who enter the system, but somehow along the way they do disappear. Thanks, Dolly.
Thank you so much, Tobile, for closing off the panel discussion so brilliantly. Appreciate the inputs, and I really get carried away when you talk about these conversations. It's really going over time, and I know we have a segment for Q&As as well. So apologies, Chairperson. I'm not sure how we're going to handle the Q&A.
Dolly, if you have sight of the questions, we can maybe just sum them in one or two questions. So there were a number of questions around culture, well, more comments than questions, to be honest. And I think the panelists have covered the questions quite well. The one that I think maybe we can touch on is what practical steps beyond all that has been put in place can we take to undo systematic and unconscious bias?
Any takers on that one?
I can try to take that one.
Cool.
Unconscious bias is such a personal journey. We've done some training within the Sandvik business to help people identify and understand what their unconscious biases were, and then have radical exposure to those specific unconscious biases to get over. So it's a difficult, I think, topic to discuss. The first thing I think, though, that could be an example is if people see the leadership intentionally and actively and openly communicate about working through their own biases, that could be a way to shift. It's not something you could openly do organization-wide, but usually when you have the biases, those around you know what they are, and they can sense what those are. So if you had your leaders either go through some training or as part of the safety annual targets, usually we have like these EHS targets, and you pick one, like one for me is I'll try walk once a day. You could have people openly talk about, I have an unconscious bias on this particular issue, and I will openly work on that issue over time. Obviously, unconscious biases tend to need to be dealt with a lot of sensitivity, but if the leadership with careful assistance showcases that they are working through it, it gives everybody else permission to work through those issues as well.
Yeah, look, and maybe let me, add to, that we've got a responsibility to help the employees, build the self-awareness. We have to help them, to shift, their egos. They need to realize, their egos, but they need to shift the egos, and also, bring in a number of, programs where employees can be trained to become more of upstanders rather than the bystanders.
You unmute, Dolly.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, colleagues, for the inputs, for the insight. This was not only empowering for me as well as a professional in the industry, but it was really fun to facilitate. Looking forward to future conversations. It cannot end here. We need to take the conversations further, take them to our areas of work, operations, and basically where we operate as well as entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Chairperson. It was really great to collaborate with the Minerals Council and WiMSA for this important conversation. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Dolly, and thank you so much to our esteemed panel. Your nuggets of wisdom in the true style of mining is true gold, and we truly, truly appreciate it. And we really look forward to engaging more. I mean, in the chat, there's people who are putting their hands up to say, I want to participate in this, I want to engage in this or that. So, colleagues, this conversation is not an event on its own. It's for us to really take the call to action and really action some of these strategies and test them out in our own lives. I mean, my personal favorite takeaway from this was really around shifting culture is personal. It starts with you acknowledging your own biases and looking in the mirror every day and saying, am I shifting in my beliefs and how do I contribute to the culture of my employer and the spaces are going to. Again, thank you so much for showing love to our panels. And the next segment was for me to share quickly about our programs in Women in Mining in South Africa. But in the interest of time, I want to just share quickly who we are. I know most of you are our members, but we still get questions on how do we partner with WiMSA? How do we get engaged and involved? So I'm going to quickly show you where to find us. So our website is www.wimsa.org.za. I've posted this in the chat. And our mandate is to provide a platform where we empower women and guide their personal growth, leadership, and career development within the industry. And today was one of the ways we do it. We've got a lot of women in the industry across the value chain, within operations, outside in consultation, in service providers and all of that as our members, and they contribute to our initiatives that run throughout the year around events, building bodies of knowledge, attracting young people into the industry, mentoring, networking, creating networking pathways within the industry between different people. And for anyone who really would like to join us, you simply go onto our website and you sign up as a member. And then we've got events that we then communicate throughout the year. You will find that on our website as well. And we really look forward to seeing you at our upcoming events. We've got networking event in line with the International Day of Women in Mining happening in Cape Town on the 30th of June. And then we'll have our flagship annual event called the WiMSA Symposium coming up on the 21st and 22nd of July. You really don't want to miss this one. It's a 2-day conference jam-packed with nuggets of wisdom from across the industry and other sectors around what is it that we need to be doing to truly shift the culture of mining to make it more sustainable. And then we'll be at the Electra Mining as well on the 10th of September. And then, as always, we return to the mining in Daba. And there's other, events that we'll communicate in due course that are still planned for the rest of this year. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us should you want to partner, collaborate, participate, and we will definitely engage with you on that one. I want to now just hand over to the Minerals Council team. They have done great work, as part of making sure we provide the industry with tools to support transformation. They want to share with us a tool that they have provided. They have developed around health needs, and I'm going to ask Dr. Andy and Dr. Dave to then join us and share what they have from the Minerals Council. Let's please welcome them. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Tumi, can you hear us?
Yes, we
Yes,
can
thank
hear
you.
you. Thank you.
Thanks very much. First, thank you so much for asking Andy and I to have this have this opportunity to present to you. I'm seriously humbled by what I've heard over the last 2 hours, and I wonder sometimes whether we don't beat ourselves up and not recognize how much is actually being done. So it's unbelievable how much is actually being done. Towards the end of 2024, the Minerals Council asked us to look into helping to develop a strategy for the health needs of women in mining. And one of the first things we did was we said, right, well, let's actually have a look-see at what's going on. And we did a survey then of 20 operations, 113,000 employees, and the survey was looking at what was actually being done around the health needs of women. And what we found was that even though a lot is being done, many mines are actually managing women's health based on perception rather than robust evidence. Now, a lot of people attending here today, in fact, the majority, are engineers or mining people, people who think strategically and logically, and people who have been involved in risk assessments, health risk assessments, other risk assessments, safety risk assessments. What we found was actually quite astounding, and that was that mines were managing women's health needs on the basis of perception rather than by robust evidence. Only 15% of mines that we surveyed had actually done a formal health needs assessment, which is quite odd, really, when you think that the professionals, the health and safety professionals on those mines do health risk assessments all the time. Only 15% had actually done a health needs assessment. 75% of mines, so a few didn't answer or couldn't answer the question, have no structured process at all for identifying and assessing and prioritizing women's health needs. So this meant that we can only assume that largely women's health needs were, the management of women's health needs was reactive. It was driven either by regulation, by advocacy, the loudest voices, or by individual opinions. And it's very clear to anyone who's been involved in health for a long time, like Andy, I, and the rest of our team members have been, that you need a structured approach. You need to be able to identify health needs and prioritize them and then address them properly. So what we said, and I think this is the conclusion of that survey, there can be no health management plan and therefore no health action without a robust assessment of the health needs in the first place. And the way to go about that, this is not rocket science. It's to identify and assess the health needs, to prioritize the health needs. And then the little gap here is to look at what's available locally, look at what the mine could actually do, and then to have a plan, a health management plan, implement and measure. So this HNA tool we published in a guidance form, that is myself, Andy Thompson, Thierry Hoffman, and Jobert. We published it and produced it for the Minerals Council. What it does really is it says, it goes through the steps of health needs assessment, where you look at the scope, you put together a team, you look at data, both primary data and secondary data. You do a services review, what's actually available on the mine or outside the mine to address these health needs. Do a gap analysis and then say, right, how can we prioritize these health needs, make recommendations, implement, and then evaluate what we're doing. So what it does, a health needs assessment process, a rigid, structured health needs assessment process, results in a site-specific health management plan. And this is very important. It's very different being on a remote mine in, let's say, the Northern Cape or Limpopo, where there are relatively rudimentary local state-provided or municipal provided health facilities, to another mine, such as in, let's say, Rustenburg, where or Carltonville, where there are health facilities that are relatively easily accessible and available. So it's a site-specific health management plan with prioritized and evidence-based interventions and gender disaggregated monitoring indicators. So what we are going to do for the Minerals Council is, what was noticed was that despite this finding, very few mines have actually gone through the process of a formal health needs assessment and are actually managing women's health. That is, they have a women's health strategy based on formal health needs assessment. What we're going to do for the Minerals Council is we're going to speak for an hour to executive level people to sell the business and ethical case for actually undertaking a health needs assessment. And then we're going to, a month or so later, actually undertake health needs assessment. And this is going to be a mix of virtual and on-site at the Minerals Council presentations over about 3.5 hours. So in other words, the intent there is to demystify the health needs assessment and actually train as far as possible people who do health risk assessments all the time to actually do a health needs assessment. The intent then is that what we'll wind up with is we'll move from perception to evidence-driven health needs assessment informed management of health of women in mining. So as I said, just a reminder then, there will be an executive session which will be an hour on around about the 25th of August now, not the 21st. The executives will be asked, or that senior level management will be asked to nominate people from the mine and put together the correct teams to attend a training session, which will be held around about the 6th of October. And that will, the intent is to assist assist that team in actually commissioning their own health needs assessment on their mine, because it is very specific. You cannot have a health needs assessment for a large deep level underground mine in Rustenburg and expect that to be similar to a remote mine in another part of the country. So commission a health needs assessment is the objective, and then to measure progress. So I've tried to save as much time as I can. The intent here is to flag what we want to do, and that is to actually demystify the health needs assessment process so that health needs assessment will actually be done on mines, and this will result in a more informed health management plan for women in mining on South African mines. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dave. This was very insightful. And as we know, these tools are only as powerful as our utilization. And we really cannot continue talking about zero harm with uncertainty around how we manage health. So thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing, how the industry takes this one forward. Up next, we are going to then go into our takeaway as well as our call to action by our Dr. Tula Balfour. Please help me welcome Dr. Balfour. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning. Oh, afternoon. No, still morning, 4 minutes. To everyone on the call, I'll try and save you on time. Just to say, we had very inspirational views. There's a lot that we can take away around culture. That has to be the key. And actually, I think the other phrase I found was when it comes to culture, for instance, culture change, we need to be good at change management. I didn't know that management change management, and actually it makes a big difference. It's something that the industry has been told about, that we do not manage our change adequately. And so change management is very essential for the industry. Overall, I think everyone was agreeing that we are doing well and pointing out the areas that we need to do far more on. There was the inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which is something that is fairly new, that people belong. And so we all need to be doing that. I think what also came through very much is how the industry can change, because sometimes it's not about the people changing. If you are paraplegic, for instance, driving a car, then they change and the controls are your hands. And so the issue of digitization, technology, modernization of the industry is critical because it can open doors for our women. And we need to be aware that there's a talent war out there. How do we ensure the mining industry can attract and retain women? And so that is a challenge for us, that we mustn't just leave the environment as it is. We need to make sure that we're able to attract and keep young people. I will stop there, Chair, and just say that we do look forward to the training on the health needs assessments that we'll be embarking on, because we believe it will be one additional tool that we'll be having that will ensure that women's needs, and particularly in this case, women's health needs, are being prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a big round of applause to Dr. Tutula for the closing address. And from me, on behalf of Women in Mining South Africa, I really want to thank you all for your engagement, your participation, and sharing your experiences with us. And we look forward to engaging with you in our future events. And Tumi, over to you. Thank you so much for this partnership.
Thank you very much, Mokgaliadi. And first of all, thanks to you, thanks to the panelists, thank you to our keynote speaker, Craig Miller, as well as to our youth representative, Nomvula, for great insights. And most of all, thank you to the participants on the call today, especially if you managed to stay on right till the end. We really appreciate it. We do also appreciate your contributions. We have been monitoring the chat quite closely, seeing your submissions, your perspectives, which we'll definitely take into consideration as we continue the work of women in mining, not just at Minerals Council, but also in collaboration with WIM. I just want to request colleagues that you please complete the post-webinar feedback survey. That will definitely help to improve the quality of our webinars and also get a sense of what other themes are critical for us to tackle in events such as this for the rest of the year. Again, as we have come to the close of our session, I just want to echo the words that Craig Miller said repetitively, that it all counts. And so thank you for your submissions. Thank you for your participation. And as we go out into changing the mining sector in South Africa, breaking barriers, owning the shift, remember that it all counts. Have a good day further, and thank you once again. Bye.
That's it. Thanks, Mpho.